Hello!
Wow, it's hard to believe it's been 25 whole years since the release of the original Nintendo Game Boy. And that's mainly because it hasn't been 25 years in the UK. It was released in mid-89 in the USA and Japan, and not until late 1990 in the UK. Thanks, ludicrously protracted, staggered, bloody release dates. Good thing they don't do that anymore. Well, not to the same extent. Anyway, right, let us all clear our throats in reverence for the original Nintendo Game Boy. There, we all finished? Then let us begin. Yes, over the next few weeks I shall be looking at the Game Boy in all its glory and all its weird accessories and all its different versions. But today, the original slightly off-white one. Same sort of colour that landlords tend to paint things because they are easily maintained and painted over relatively cheaply. So yes, this is the device that took the world by storm. Several storms, in fact. I mean, it did phenomenally well. I think the first USA shipment sold out however many they made, which I should have looked up. I'm going to guess at 1 million. And yeah, shipped the whole lot and they all sold. Then they made more and sold those. That is what we in business call a success. So what was the unit itself? Well, the idea was you've got all these crappy handheld LCD games and the quite nice ones from Nintendo themselves. And Nintendo thought, hey, interchangeable cartridges, it's the future. Buy the box, buy extra games, license the lot, and away we go with a new niche market. And they weren't far wrong, to say the least. When I was young, I would have killed for one of these, but they didn't exist at the time. But yeah, something with a sort of screen that you could take with you and play games on and change the games was the sort of thing I desperately wanted. But it didn't appear until a few years later. Well, it turns out actually there were things like the Microvision, but who's heard of those? Answer, only people who've seen my own videos. So, what was the unit itself like then? Well, a big old slab of batteries for starters. You've got 4 in there of the AA variety. They last around 15 hours, I think, meaning the thing is truly portable. In fact, with decent modern alkalines, you can get probably approaching double that. I said 30 hours? Because that's double 15. Are you making notes, math students? Yes, seriously, it was actually something you could put in a oversized pocket that would weigh you down slightly, but you could actually take it with you and play stuff. Screen, it's about 2.5 inches, just over. The resolution is 160 by 144 pixels, and it's capable of displaying 4 shades of slightly weird olivey off-green colour, which, thinking back, is slightly odd. But hey, it was the technology we had at the time. And compare this to other things. I mean, we had the Game Gear and the Atari Lynx. I love the Atari Lynx. In fact, I've got an almost complete collection, which I will show later. But let's face it, portable is not really what they were. With new batteries in them, they would last around 4 hours, 5 hours if you were lucky. And if you were using rechargeable batteries of the time, you'd be lucky to get 2 hours out of the bloody thing. But anyway, Nintendo came along with this, and my goodness, what a marketing blitz and a success. And that was massively helped, of course, by this rather lovely game which came with it. Infogenius French translator. Yes, all the kids were in the playground going, oh man, translated me some Camus last night. It was right. No, I'm actually talking about Tetris, of course. Tetris, the actiony puzzle game thing where you slot things down a thing and it's all vaguely Russian and it's got nice music. And my god, there's no point even talking about it because everybody knows what this is. In fact, little personal anecdote for you. If you're wondering whether gaming has kind of hit the mainstream, I was in the Norwich City Centre fairly recently, and there were buskers playing the theme to Tetris. And yes, they were playing the Tetris theme and not the actual original Russian folk song, because it kept getting faster until they suddenly stopped. But the real resonant thing was that a woman in about, I would have said, mid-60s was walking by me and indeed said, wow, that's the theme to Tetris. If she can recognise it, I think we may have got a bit more mainstream. Tetris, what a game, and something you couldn't possibly produce a sequel to. Oh, let us never speak of it again. So, the iconic nature of this little beastie cannot be overstated, to say the least. The story goes, in fact, that Sony, who had previously produced the Walkman, of course, being the portable sound box, were absolutely furious that they didn't come up with it first. Then years later they came up with the PSP and never quite got the hang of mobile gaming. But anyway, we are not here to talk about software and stuff, we are here to talk about hardware, so let's have a look at the mighty Game Boy of Nintendo in all its physical glory. And look, there's scratches on the screen, because there always always are. This isn't actually my original Game Boy from the time. My one ended up with vertical lines disappearing in the LCD, so I got shot of it. But that is something that happens to these. This one I think is all right. I haven't turned it on for a while. I'm slightly worried. Anyway, D-pad. A really nice one, very similar to the old NES control pad, and my goodness, it stands up to some battering, because let's face it, it would have to, you can't just buy another controller. Nice buttons to smash on and get angry when you're playing that Batman platformer, which was slightly too difficult near the end. We've got a start button, we've got a select button, headphones go in the bottom so as not to get in the way, you've got your mono speaker on the sound to bleep at you. Most games did seem to support stereo, there are many attachments, which we'll see in future videos, where you slap them on the bottom and it gives you stereo speakers and also makes the thing too big and unwieldy. We have the external connector. This usually came with a piece of plastic to cover it, but all of those were lost within 0.4 seconds of you opening the box. Basically, you could use that to connect this to another Game Boy and play head-to-head Tetris, which is fantastic. It only supports 2 Game Boys, but there was a 4-player lead, but very few games actually were compatible with it, if I remember. Volume, I'm not going to fiddle with because I've got it about right, I hope. And contrast. Oh yes, because with the joy of LCD screens, you're going to have to fiddle with the contrast depending what the ambient light is like, and it's a bit of a problem with the Game Boy, as we shall come to see. And use only blah 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 blah. Yes, mains adapter. Just because you may not always have batteries and you probably don't want to waste your batteries while you're at home. Cartridges go in here. Are you keeping up? And then when you turn the power on, it pushes this little bit of plastic over to lock them into place, hence why all the cartridges have a clock out of the corner. Actually, let's have a look at one, shall we? A box. This is Raging Fighter, which is an obscure one-on-one fighting game, which has amusing cover art, which frankly is why I picked it. I wonder how he gets in and out of that weird unitard. Anyway, it's got the original Nintendo seal of quality, as pretty much everything did. It's just basically a way of saying we got money out of this. I never realised this was a Konami game. And there it is. It looks like Street Fighter 2, but doesn't play anywhere near as well. Fists and feet collide in a furious battle, or it's like a game of Twister, actually. Anyway, as you can see, cardboard boxes, which were very easily damaged. I mean, like, very easily. This one's been kept pretty well, but something has slightly squashed it at one stage, and oh yes. Basically, these boxes do not keep over the years, and yeah, collectors, I imagine, weep at them. However, they weren't entirely necessary, for Nintendo did a very good thing. Wow, that's a really weird picture. I hadn't seen that one before. You've actually broken the sky. Is that something made by Truman out of the Truman Show? Anyway, that's irrelevant. What is relevant is this, the cartridge itself, which always came in these really nice hard plastic cases. So therefore, I think Nintendo were basically expecting you to lose or destroy the box in some fashion, because who cares, you're actually keeping your game safe, which is the important thing. Well done, hats off. We need more of that sort of thing, and sadly they stopped doing it with the Game Boy Advance. Anyway, Raging Fighter, the cartridge, just what you always wanted. One chick out of the corner, and one little screw thing in the back. And away you go into cartridge heaven. Go on, let's turn it on then and quickly have a look at Raging Fighter. The battery light, annoying red things shining in your eyes, not actually that bad. They didn't make it overly bright. It always says Nintendo at the start, and sometimes shows corrupt text if the cartridge hasn't got in properly, like it hasn't this time. That is annoying. Bear with me. That's right, give it a blow. Probably doesn't do anything, it's because I haven't pushed it in far enough or something, but it makes you feel better, and that's the important bit. Ding! And yay, away we... Oh. Oh man, I've talked that up. Look on the right-hand side. Vertical line has gone. Oh, how irritating. Anyway, quickly, show us how we can rage at some fighters. One player. Practice. I shall select... Oh my god, they all look the same, I've forgotten this. I think he had the most amusing haircut, so let's have him. Versus him, because I don't really care anymore. Yes, whatever. Yes, it's all good. Let us play dynamic. Come on then. I want to see immense violence. This is actually showing up pretty well. You will notice the old screen had a fair bit of ghosting, to say the least. When things move, they tend to turn into a bliss of a blurry mess, which is a massive problem if certain games weren't written properly. In fact, I can't really see what's going on here through the camcorder at all. It looks vaguely in focus, and you can actually sort of see stuff moving, but as opposed to what they're actually doing to each other, I'm not entirely sure. Does he do fireballs, this one? Yes, yeah, I didn't know actually, didn't I? Ah, the joys. From this angle, I cannot see the screen actually in real life at all. I can look entirely through the viewfinder. For that is the weakness of the Game Boy. Ambient light could kill it off. You could buy many light attachments to try and overcome this. None of them quite worked, unfortunately. I've lost. This is the worst game ever. Go and hide over there with other obscure fighting games. So, what else can we have a look at then? Well, the Game Boys themselves never massively deviated from the original design until they released the Game Boy Pocket, which is a different beast we'll look at later. They did produce them in various different colours. Good luck finding any of those. They're all relatively rare. But the cartridges themselves did change around slightly. Here we have a copy, a fairly standard one. This is WWF Superstars. Basically, WWF Superstars is a game every Game Boy owner actually owned, but none of them ever remembered buying. Scientists have theorised that if you put a Game Boy in a cupboard or a shelf where you can't see it for more than 8 months, a copy of WWF Superstars actually materialises next to it, and nobody knows the process involved. Anyway, let's have a look at some slightly different coloured cartridges. Shadowgate Classic here is showing the black cartridge. The lesser spotted black cartridge did occasionally exist, like for the Pokemon trading game. Now, Pokemon always came in interestingly coloured cartridges. You had the yellow one for Pokemon Yellow, you had the red one for Pokemon Red, you had the blue one for Do you see where this is going? Here's the silver one, look. It looks like a normal one, but it's spangly and slightly lighter, and probably worth £1 million if you smelt it down into its... No, it's not. I'm completely lying about that. And they got a little more interesting as time got on, with old Pokemon Pinball, which is a pinball game featuring Pokemon. Do you see where I'm going here? Bit of a cash-in, let's be honest. My main memory of this, actually, is that the ball is a Pokeball, and yet the physics doesn't quite work properly. I don't know why I said that as if having a Pokeball in it would mean all the physics would be perfect, as if all physics is determined by Pokeballs. If that is true, we've discovered something amazing. You may wonder why it's got a battery slot in it. That's because it came, well, this is like a rumble pack, basically. It causes very mild vibration on the old Game Boy when something exciting happens. Oh well, there you go then. Don't look underwhelmed. We were interested in such things in the early 90s. Now, as with everything that's produced and popular, fakery comes into it at some point. And fake Game Boy cartridges were not exactly something that were rare. Let's have a look at a few of the billions I have around the house. Super 4-in-1, yep, they got 4 games, Dr. Mario and some others. Looks like Clacks in the top right there. The bottom one, some sort of tank-related game, and to the left, Motocross. Yes, basically, they would sell unlicensed cartridges. Look, doesn't even say Nintendo Game Boy on the top. It's just entirely blank. And shove them out with more than one game on them so you could buy them in usually slightly odd flea markets when you went abroad on holiday. And look, this one's got 62 in one, and it's a deluxe boy. And whilst the plastic is fairly rough on the cartridge, they have actually written Nintendo Game Boy on it. Now, the most common knockoff cartridge I've seen is this one, which has like a weird faded Mickey Mouse in the background, and a lot of games listed on it in both Japanese or maybe Chinese. Actually, looking at it, I think it's Chinese. Why am I even trying to ascertain? I don't really know the difference, I'm going to be honest here. And on the right, in English. You've got things like Mickey Mouse, Super Mario, Penguin Egg. Yes, you can guess what that actually is. And it goes down like that, and then it starts repeating itself, like 1997 Tetris and Crazy Mario. Yes, it's the same game on there again. They just give it another listing in the menu because they're cheeky. And if you're lucky, it will start on a higher difficulty level or something. Let's have a quick look just to demonstrate how these buggers work. Oh, that's probably a bad sign. Hang on. The joy of cartridges. The digital download Game Boy didn't come for a few years later. Right, Nintendo, show us what you got. Oh wait, you're not Nintendo, you're some no-mark trying to make money by selling their games illegally and doing quite well in it, I imagine. So let's go down to, for instance, Bomb Jack. I seem to remember this one had particularly interesting blurring effect on the character as he jumped around. Funkadelic. And yes, they all work exactly as a game you would have paid money for. There's a thought. Level 1. There he is. Whee! Oh, you're supposed to pick up the bombs in the order of them. You're supposed to pick up the one that's sparking the whole time. But unfortunately, due to the lighting, I can't see the ones on the far right, so I can't really tell where that is. And oh god, there's evil things happening. It actually plays pretty well. The old Game Boy screen runs at something like 60 frames a second, which is pretty natty. I remember playing this for many hours on the Atari ST. Mostly because I didn't have any other games, but it's still pretty good. Anyway, as you can see, you get a menu and the game loads, and away you go. Not all of them were quite that advanced, though. For instance, we've got this jolly one here, which apparently has Double Dragon 2, RoboCod 2, which would be a hilarious typo if there wasn't actually a real game called RoboCod. Mickey Mouse Dangerous Chase, Battletoads. Yes, we have Battletoads. Go on then. Let's show you how this one works. Answer, not very well. Wait for it. Ah, the joys. Oh my goodness. And I think, yeah, we're straight into RoboCop 2, not RoboCod 2. And the annoying thing is, say you don't want to play RoboCop 2, you want to play one of the others, you press the button on the back, and it changes. All very well and good. But now you have to wait for this again to see which game has come up. And then, nope, don't want the Disney game. Press another one. It can take ages to cycle through and get the one you actually want. And the biggest weakness, really, is that also they don't seem to loop through in the order actually listed on the cartridge. Go on then, what is this game? Oh, it's Battletoads. Suffice to say, nobody's life is long enough for Battletoads on the Game Boy. And that wasn't the only one. Here's one with a slightly rubbery and yellowy button. God, there's so many of these things you would not believe. Hey, speaking of coloured cartridges, look at this jolly one. It's Hugo 2, except, again, this quite obviously seems to be some sort of rip-off. It's got like a cheap, almost laminated after being inkjet printed looking label, and this weird FMC sticker stuck over the copyright. Also, the whole thing feels very cheap. Hugo, one of those weird characters, very popular in mainland Europe and not really anywhere else. I'm trying to remember if this game's any good. No, it wasn't. But you could also pick up games that Nintendo would never have released. For instance, Arnold Schwarzenegger in Raw Deal for the Super Game Color Boy. Color Boy being an actual thing we will discover in a later video, but it's all got spangly print on it. Spangly. And Arnie slightly out of the correct aspect ratio. So, there is no Raw Deal game for the Game Boy to my knowledge. What is this going to be like? Is it something they've written at home before their love of Arnie? Well, there's one way to find out. I had a horrible feeling it had gone wrong there. Zen Comics Incorporated, Zen Intergalactic Ninja. Okay, now here's what they've done. I believe this is called a bait and switch, where they tell you something is one thing, turns out to be another entirely. Yep, it's just a copy of Zen Intergalactic Ninja, which, as you have probably guessed, has very little to do with the old Arnold Schwarzenegger film Raw Deal. You lied to us, and now we believe in nothing. And that wasn't the only cartridge to do it by any stretch of the imagination. Here we go. This looks like King of the Fighters. Actually, it's Killer Instinct. Makes no sense at all. I do like the way it just says game across the top. At least you can't argue with that. Man, this is cheap plastic, that one, to say the least. But at least, when it came to complex stuff like Pokemon Pinball, it may have been a bulky old cartridge, but they couldn't actually produce a rip-off of that, could they? Let us never speak of it again. So, the Game Boy gave us many, many hours of enjoyment through its various games, some of which are pretty good, some of which aren't pretty good. There we are, that's the most on-the-fence statement you'll ever hear in any sort of gaming video. But, as with everything which had a billion games produced for it, it's entirely true. Problem was, as we were saying earlier, not very good under certain lighting conditions, and this would lead to all sorts of sitting in weird places under lamps and stuff so you could see the game and play it properly, some games being worse than others. But people have now taken it on their hands to produce a solution to this problem. Nintendo themselves did produce a solution. They made a sort of version of the Game Boy Pocket that lit up with an electroluminescent display. But again, that's for another day. Today, we're going to look at this rather niftily customised Game Boy with LEDs in it, so you can actually see the screen. Allow me to demonstrate. We shall demonstrate using Race Driving, which is one of the, well, arguably the most technically advanced game for the Game Boy. They managed to get proper 3D running on it. Guru Larry told me about this, and apparently it was convinced Nintendo to give them the license to do the 3D games for the SNES with the old, what was it called, the Super Effects chip? I can't even remember these days. Anyway, you may remember Race Driving as the sequel to Hard Driving, or Hard Driven, as Darren at school insisted on calling it, which would make this game race-driven, which sounds like a description of a particularly appalling hate crime. Anyway, let's turn it on. And oh my god, that's green! Let me fiddle with the contrast so you can see it a bit better at home there. There we are, Race Driving. Now, this isn't entirely successful, I don't think, for the glowy screen here. It's a little bit overly bright, and there doesn't seem to be any immediate way to change it, but perhaps more importantly, you've got a quite serious footlighting effect at the bottom, where you can see there's like 4 LEDs along there. Looks worse in real life, actually, than it does on the screen. And trying to get this to work on the screen is going to be difficult. I think that's about the best we'll get. It's sort of cutting off the bottom, but that doesn't happen in real life. Right, let's go for the Sportster Auto. Stunt, Autocross, or Super Stunt? Stunt, I reckon. Are you ready for excitement, crashing, and me being very confused because I can barely see the screen? Go! Oh my god, are they the other cars? I don't remember there being any other cars when I wrote this, but I played it before. That's strange. Oh yeah, here we go. Funky. Reminds me of Stunt Car Racer on the Atari ST. What a game that was. Crash the barn! Oh, it turns out the point of the game wasn't to crash into the barn. Anyway, as I'm sure you're aware, this is pretty damn impressive for a tiny little CPU'd beast like the Game Boy. Runs a lot better than any of the... genuinely couldn't see that coming. Runs a lot better than any of the other 8-bit home computer conversions I can remember over the time. Off with you. Shh, shh. There we go. You rest now with your incredibly bright screen. So there we go. That be the Nintendo Game Boy. You know, people say about things, oh, that was ahead of its time, or oh, it came out too late. Ahead of its time can be a curse or a blessing in some way, but I think the Game Boy was exactly of its time. It's of technology that we all kind of understood that existed, and it just came along when people wanted a device that did exactly what it offered. And blimey, its resonance can still be felt throughout the industry. Poncy. Anyway, join me next time when we shall look at some of the more freakish accessories released for the Game Boy, and then we'll look at some other Game Boys, then some more Game Boy, then I'm going to sleep.
Subscribe for more.
Oh, bloody hell, I've been looking for one of those.